This is a pleasure. This is an honor.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for inviting us.
I'm always up for a fun conversation.
Oh yeah. I'm like really, really curious about like the production that you're doing. I've been really following little the vlogs that you guys been doing, the little easy devlog, and
Mm-hmm.
what you're doing over there with the 3D and actually setting everything up with like a set. You're actually creating like a set using the 3D and using VR. I find that truly very curious on how that is actually being done and the steps being taken and how that actually works because I've never seen anything like it. So I'm just really curious on how that's really being done.
Yeah, well, that was that was a decision that I made very early on, before all this started, before even the Kickstarter. I had been looking into how 3D maybe could be integrated into the general animation pipeline, because in my experience, sometimes when we're asked to do boards, when we're asked to animate over scenes, boards traditionally layout when the scene is already planned out and like somebody has like etched out the entire scenery. That's usually supposed to be done by someone else, but over time in the business, the board artist has been taking on more and more layout responsibility during production, and that's kind of created this sort of a bottleneck. We're in this aim to kind of like cut down on time and cost. You end up creating sometimes issues when you have the board artists have to make all these set decisions basically. One, it can complicate your view of the environment, like where to choose a good shot and stuff, because I feel like sometimes I would make more conservative decisions in terms of like where I would basically put the camera in the scene and follow the characters and all that, just to avoid having to do more layout work. Because there wasn't really time to sit there and like noodle a background forever. So you have to keep things like very, very staid, very conservative. Everybody has to be like on a flat plane and roughly on the same level and stuff. You can't get too creative with placement, because otherwise you have to design the set a whole lot more. And then on the other side, if you're in animation, if you're doing the animation part of the program, part of the pipeline, and the layout hasn't been properly figured out, there's no backgrounds finished or anything, it can be very difficult because while you're animating, you have to keep in mind that comp means composition, is going to have to take your footage and composite it into the scenery later. And if your character isn't like really lined up with the background in specific ways, like let's say they have to like touch a pole, or like walk through some grass, or like walk behind or in front of things, it can get very difficult to figure out like how much of your animation is really like worth spending time on. If like, you have these, you have like this arm moving around, but it's actually going to be blocked or something like that. um and I remember on the last production I was on, that was actually a big issue where there was just so many unique backgrounds. This was Midnight Gospel, back when I was doing some animation at Titmouse.
Mm-hmm.
There were so many unique backgrounds. I don't know if you've seen that show. It's on Netflix. It's really gorgeous, like just super lush environments. But there were so many environments, none of which were reused, that created this bottleneck during the production process, where background design always had to play catch up constantly to animation, which is not terribly ideal. And I realized as we were going into this and thinking about it, I was like, it'd be just very convenient if on a production, like you instead built the set first. You kind of did layout first, and you could, if you could then give that set to the board artist before anything,
Just like
then you could.
real movies.
Yes. So just like in live action where you have a set and then you're the cinematographer, you choose your shot, and you use, you work with the environment to find like interesting angles and all of that. If we could integrate that into the animation pipeline, but not just 3D animation. I mean, we're pretty familiar with that idea, but 2D animation, just what could be done if we said, okay, what if we started with a 3D set and then like went from there? Because there's nothing saying that you couldn't like then paint over that set. Like it doesn't have to be a pure 3D render. You don't have to treat it like a 3D environment where you have to like, you know, walk through it like in a video game where every asset needs to be figured out from every angle. It's like, no, you could just treat it as like layout and then you paint over on top of it. But still, like the amount of flexibility in choosing your shots and basically having layout every time you pick your angle is just really, really convenient. And then on top of that, a lot of what makes this possible is Blender.
Blender.
In 2019, they updated to 2.8 and they did a huge overhaul of their entire program. Like the user interface is a lot more user friendly. It's a lot more familiar to anybody who has some even limited experience with 3D programs, whereas previously Blender was kind of its own beast. It was a little hard to parse if you were familiar with anything else, and it was very difficult to parse if you were unfamiliar with anything else. But I think it's a little bit more straightforward now. When I open up the program, I'm like, oh, okay, I see. You know, I can click this tab here to animate. I can click this tab here to focus on just rendering. I can, you know, click through all these tabs to this side, and it's pretty clear how everything's organized. There's less searching around, but importantly, it's a very powerful piece of software that is free. So anybody can download it, and you can thus build a set inside of Blender, give it to any artist, and they can work with it, provided that their computer is like powerful enough. AKA, we have to make sure that the sets are low poly enough that anybody's computer can work off of that. But the idea is that we're not limited in terms of our scope by access to technology. The technology already exists at a very reasonable price point of free. And then in addition to that, Blender has invested a lot of time and energy into developing their grease pencil tool set inside of Blender, which is a 2D animation tool set. Now, we'll be animating in Toon Boom Harmony, which is a professional software, then you do have to pay for that. But to be able to block out certain shots using grease pencil by drawing in 2D inside of a 3D environment, that can make things much, much easier for composite later on, for layout in general, for the board artists if they just want to like experiment with like an element or whatever inside of a scene, and they don't have to like remember, okay, this you know this cup was there, I have to make sure that this angle is correct here, that kind of. It's like you just draw it in the scene and there it is. It's just it's there. In fact, you can draw a character inside of a car and then parent the grease pencil object, which this character drawing is attached to the car, have the car move, key that, and just, you know, point the camera at it. And instead of having to draw a car with the character inside of it, you know, for every panel that you need to describe the action, you just literally set it up and you've just blocked the action out that the animators later on can make use of directly.